Shepard. Where are you visiting from? Love to see who's here. Joanne from Virginia, welcome. Hello, Teresa and Elsa, Erin, Carol and Debbie, welcome. Flippa, Melissa. Oh, now they're going so quick. Welcome, everyone. And I am going to ask you if you are not muted, go ahead and do please mute yourself. Just to keep a good, what's the word? Audio quality for everyone. Audio fidelity. Thank you. Thanks for showing up tonight. Thanks for writing your names in. It's nice to see you all. I'm just scrolling back through. And I think we're going to start pretty much right here on time. I'm going to invite Jenna Kirkpatrick, who is the representative from Evermore. But I just want to say she's a wonder of a human, an incredible, amazing person who makes things happen. And she's going to welcome us all here tonight.
You, Rosemary. I feel the exact same way about you. I appreciate that. Um, Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to be here tonight. As Rosemary said, I'm Jenna Kirkpatrick. I'm the manager of outreach and engagement. Evermore is a national nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C., and our mission is to make the world a more livable place for bereaved people. We are changing policies and practices within our communities and across our nation so that all bereaved people can achieve a healthy, prosperous, and equitable future. Please visit us at evermore.org to learn more. We'll be sharing a special newsletter with you after this workshop. I usually have it done by Friday, and it's called Evermore Voices. It will contain the recording of this workshop, the collaborative poem that we write tonight, and the featured poems and invitations to write from Rosemerry as well. I'm also a poet and a bereaved mom, and every morning I read Rosemary's poetry, and one that struck me recently was called Self-Talk. It's exhaustion that helps me to hear the softer voice beneath the command, the quiet voice that arrives like the slightest of waves, the voice that arrives like low morning sun. And the voice enters the clinch of me like gentle rain meeting dry earth. And it says, of course you're afraid. For now, it's enough to remember the possibility of opening. My wish tonight is that we all hold each other in community and understanding. And let's take a few seconds for some deep breaths in silence to acknowledge all of our precious light and energy. Please join me in offering a very warm welcome to our gracious friend and Evermore Poet Laureate, Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you. And I also want to thank Eileen Tapia, who's here tonight helping us with our technology. I'm so grateful for that. And on that note, Eileen, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and make it so that we can all see each other right now, just so everybody who's here has a chance to look and see who else is here. Hello, friends. There we are. Go ahead. That's right. Just wave, lean in. Hello. Hello, other humans who've chosen to come here tonight. Hello, other beautiful hearts who are willing to wonder, what if I meet this grief? And I'm going to begin with a little song poem or a pong, as Jenna might say, uh, from Gregory Orr. Maybe just close your eyes and let the poem land on you. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Growing, growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. And when it feels right, open your eyes. Welcome, friends. Welcome. Some of you I know have been here before. I'm so grateful you've come back. And if you have been here before, then I'm going to invite you to help create the safest possible space for the people who are here to show up as openly as possible, knowing that every one of us is just freaking courageous to be here. I also want to, if it is your first time, welcome. Welcome. I'm so glad you've joined us. It's not easy to show up, period. It's not easy to show up. It is especially not easy to show up with a broken heart. So I want to promise everyone who's here tonight that my job is to make it so that you can, to the best of your ability, show up. I want to welcome you with the love that you have for the person or the being that you've lost, and for all of that complexity too, because it never is truly simple, is it? Um, and to that effect, perhaps, oh, the name of the poem doesn't have a name, but the author is Gregory Orr. ORR, Gregory Orr. And I'm going to invite you now in the chat bar just to please mention the name, please put in the name of anything or anyone that you are grieving right now. And it may be multiple people, it may be not human, whatever it is that you are bringing right now, I'm going to invite you to put it into the chat bar. I'm going to light a candle and invite the light of every one of these beings to be with us. As my beautiful friend Wendy said to me when my son died, he has given you his love light to carry. What love light do you carry? Hmm. Thank you. Thank you for bringing them in. I'm going to encourage you to read them, read through each other's. I know that everyone is, on mute right now, but maybe say some of the names out loud. Cynthia, Cian, Heather, myself, just Moira, Jaro, John, Mike. Just say some of these names aloud. Say out loud the name of the person who you are remembering. Finn, Eduardo, Dad, Donna. They have given you their love light to carry. So part of what we'll be doing together tonight is, this is kind of the outline of how it's going to go. I'm going to talk just for a little bit. Then I'll read a poem and we'll write one together, all of us contributing one line. And then we'll read a poem a couple of times and talk about it. I'll offer some writing invitations. You'll go off to write. We'll come back and talk about process. We'll do that whole thing all over again. We'll read another poem out loud and then we'll talk about it. You'll go off and write, you'll come back, and then there will be a chance to share or not. I just want to let everybody know right away that nobody has to share. If for any reason it doesn't feel safe to share, please do not worry about that. You don't have to. You can either go off into a small group, or at the end, there will also be a chance for you just to stay in the main group where we will continue to talk about process. And then we'll close with some pearls, and I'll teach you that little song that I sang. So, a few things I want to mention about writing and grief. One is What will not happen tonight? What will not happen with writing? Nothing will be fixed. Not a thing. Writing does not change any of the sadness about what has happened. However, it can help us to meet a moment. It can help us to show up and be curious about what is true right now. It can help us to ask questions. It can help us to meet very big divergent feelings, how we could be absolutely devastated and maybe also full of gratefulness or joy at the same time. Writing can allow us to be very still. And to that effect, I want to say this, that if you don't write a single word tonight, but you just show up with your wonder, then you will have done it right. So you don't actually even have to write. All you need to bring is a willingness to show up, or bring your unwillingness to show up. That's okay too. Whatever happens tonight, I just want to promise you, you can only do it right. The other thing I want to just say is I want everyone, every single person here tonight to promise not one of us is going to write anything good. Not one of us. That doesn't matter one bit. But every one of us, if we write at all, the invitation is just to write something true, to write something true. And let each line that we write, just invite yourself, write the next true thing, write the next true thing. And the other promise that I want you to keep to yourself and to each other is that we are going to keep each other safe while we do this. Grief is so different for every single one of us. So, wherever you are at in this very moment with grief, I want you to know that you are welcome just the way you are right now. One of the biggest helps for me as I was showing up for grief, for life after the death of my son, was that I began to give myself this little prompt. Every day I would write, "Today grief is," and I wouldn't know how to fill in the blank. But I'd just look around me and I'd fill it in. Today grief is a meadow. Today grief is ice. Today grief is a blue sky. What was profound about this little mm, fill in the blank exercise was that it could be very simple, but it also helped me understand that every day grief changed, that grief changed from moment to moment, that my relationship to grief was changing constantly. And also, it allowed me to look outside of myself into the natural world or into the human world, actually, for information about how to show up. I wanted to share just a poem that I wrote that was based out of this prompt, and then we're going to write one together. So the way this poem began, I just looked around, I filled in the blank. Today, grief is a teaspoon. That's what was sitting on the counter in front of me, and this poem is called How the Healing Happens. Again today, I dig with my teaspoon into the soil of sorrow. It is said there is healing water somewhere below. Perhaps I wished for a shovel. Perhaps I wished there was no shovel to be found. Perhaps I did find a shovel, but the work was too heavy, too hard. It is not hard to dig one teaspoon at a time. Anyone can do it. The hole gets wider, deeper. At some point, it feels like a well. It is easy work. It is the hardest work I have ever done. I thirst. Yet what heals us is not only the promised water, what heals is the work itself. Dry and slow. One spoonful and another spoonful and another parched spoonful and another. Today, grief is a teaspoon. And I feel like that's part of what we're doing when we come together in this way, when we invite ourselves to show up with a pen or with a keyboard and say, I wonder what's here. Each time we sit down to write, it's like digging another teaspoon in the soil of sorrow to the well where the water is underneath. What did Gregory say in that poem? Growing through grieving, through this deepening we didn't choose, teaspoon by teaspoon. So I'm going to invite you, and I'm putting in the chat bar right now this little invitation. Today, grief is. And I want you to fill in that blank any way that feels right to you. And I'm going to go ahead and read some of these out loud. And in this way, we'll create a group poem. And we may not be able to hear every single person's, but as Jenna said, we will send out a transcript so that you're able to see how we create this group grief poem. And whatever you fill it in with, whether it's an adjective, today grief is lonely, or perhaps you fill it in with a noun that becomes a metaphor, today grief is a teaspoon. But however you fill it in, you can only do this right. Today, grief is too big and deep. Today, grief is laundry and sunshine. It is omnipresent. Today, grief is a flickering candle. It is overwhelming and constant. It's sharp as vinegar. Today, grief is the full moon, slanting rain, the sunset, a steep, muddy slope. Today, grief is deep and slow, a dense rock. It's unreal. It's tears. It is pouring rain in New Jersey. Today, grief is a purple gel pen running out of ink. It's my short temper. It's a rainbow. It's a mountain that feels like I can't get over it. Today, grief is still and an open window. It's a lot of talking. Today, grief is a teeter-totter and my fear of falling. It is sand in the mouth and a Beach Boy song. It's helpless rage. Today, grief is lonely. It's the pouring rain. It's drifting clouds. It's returning to the calm. It's a landscape I grow weary of. Today, grief is the redwoods and a hole of uncertainty in my heart and a hovering butterfly. Today, grief is complicated. Today, it's sadness. It's a longing to be with you again. It's a sweet memory. It is feeling hungry. Today, grief is soft and tender wind above trees. It's an empty place where laughter lived. It's a camellia bush. It's a stone in my hand, a hollow ache, the wave that wells up in me at the thought of your courage. It's a mountain that feels impossible to climb. Today, grief is wind blowing in the clouds, and it's distant and far away. It's a cactus. Its thorns draw blood from my tender hand. And then it flowers impossibly pink. Today, grief's an ocean. It permeates in my blood cells. It's a kaleidoscope. It's raindrops melting the snow, falling magnolia blossoms, and the memory of breath. It's a warm bed and a rainy morning finding its way into an afternoon of sunshine. It's numbness. It's tenderness. The sore ribs around my heart, it's like ashes and a snowdrift in front of the garage. Today, grief is a chasm in the midst of a shattered ice floe. It's skiing on the mountain, my turns, his turns. It's a family photo. It's waking up with a power outage and a dream of crying. It's the tree outside my window with chopped branches and endless gray skies, and it's always there, and I won't give in. It's a high wind howling, immediate and steep. It's my closest companion. It's the setting sun and a smile from a stranger, a shell to hide in. It's sad and empty and loving and full, a lake without a bottom. Grief is my shadow. It's a stranger's smile. It's a bird feeder empty for fear of bird flu. It's a spiral, a roller coaster, a question. Today, grief is missing my beloved. It's a raindrop, a spring of water, then surging outward. Today, grief is a dirt road. Oh, well, that was incredible, friends. That was incredible. And I do want to point out, if you haven't written a poem before, and if you haven't, you are not the only one. There are plenty of people here tonight who have not written poems before, and I want to promise you that you can, that poems can be as simple as a list like this, and you could just make a list. Today, grief is, and just make a list of the things that it is, and just fill in that blank again and again and again. And in this way, write yourself into being present with what is true right now. So I'm going to invite you to go ahead and wonder about how grief, we can really write about it in two ways. One, writing about the person or thing or animal that we are grieving. And the other way we could do it is to write about our relationship with grief itself. And tonight we're going to have a chance to do both of these. And the first poem that we're going to read together, we're going to put it up on the screen. And I'm going to ask for two people, please, to read it out loud. The first time that you listen, I always think that the first time we listen, it's like us reaching toward the poem, what's in it for me? And the second time when you listen to the poem, maybe even close your eyes, lean back, and let the poem do all the work, and you just receive it like it lands on you like a blanket. I'm going to need two people, please, to volunteer. And if you would raise your hand, I will not see you raising your hand. So I'm going to need you to use the reactions bar down below and raise your hand with that. Philippa, thank you for jumping right in. And Juliana, thank you so much. Whenever you're ready, Philippa.
December by Michael Miller. I want to be a passenger in your car again and shut my eyes while you sit at the wheel, awake and assured in your own private world, seeing all the lines on the road ahead, down a long stretch of empty highway without any other faces in sight. I want to be a passenger in your car again and put my life back in your hands.
Go ahead, Juliana.
I'm sorry, I have some noise here. Shall I read the same poem?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not a native speaker, so sorry. I want to be I want to be a passenger in your car again and shut my eyes while you sit at the wheel, awake and assured in your own private world, seeing all the lines on the road ahead. Down a long stretch of empty highway without any other faces in sight. I want to be a passenger in your car again and put my life back in your hands.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing. Thank you for reading. So I'm going to invite people now to just notice out loud, and together we'll have a little conversation. If you would, again, just raise your hand using the reactions bar because I won't be able to see you otherwise. Or if you can't find the reactions bar, you can put your name or your comment into the chat bar and I'll try and find you that way. So this poem about missing someone, about what it is that it was to be like when they were alive. And who is this? Lynette writes, I love this poem and never heard of Michael Miller. This is also the only poem I know of Michael Miller's. I love there's no gender in this poem, right? This is a poem. Honestly, this could be this could be anyone. I love that about it too. This poem made me feel like a child, says Lynette. Anyone else willing to share? Is there a word or a phrase or an image that stands out to you? Colleen.
I want to be a passenger, and that relates to the fact that for a year after he died, I could not drive, as I was always his passenger.
Thank you for bringing that very personal connection in. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm going to say it right, so please correct me if I don't. Gratia?
Gracia.
Gracia, thank you.
It speaks to me of an incredible sense of safety that this person had and has lost.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Especially those last lines, right? I want to put my life back in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gracia. And Heidi.
On that note, too, it struck me, in addition to the put my life back in your hands, without any other faces in sight. There was something about the intimacy of that, just maybe because I lost my husband, right? It's such an intimate relationship, those times where it's just that one other face that you're focused on. And that struck me.
Yes, you're so right about that. This is a really intimate poem. And in those moments when we are together in a small space in a car with this other person, it is very intimate, just the two of us, no one else in sight. Beautiful. Thank you. Cherie, hello, friend.
Hello. I was struck by the lines down a long stretch of empty highway because that feels a lot like my life in grief now. You're just going down this long, empty, unknown, and maybe I don't see the lines ahead always.
All right, right. That's really beautiful. This long, empty unknown. We may or may not even see the lines ahead. Thank you. Thank you for that. Someone had their hand up and it disappeared. So I don't know if you just had your hand up and you wanted to say something. I've lost you. But in the meantime, Susan and then Nina.
Yes, thank you, Rosemary. I'm grieving my father, and this reminded me of when I was a very little girl, and I'd be in the back seat of the car, and he was driving. And there was nowhere more safe to be than in the car with my father driving. And I have dreamed about us being in the car, so this must be, what is it? Synchronicity of some kind? The
Isn't it
metaphor?
amazing?
You
Oh,
understand what I mean? So
I
there is something very intimate about a car and the driver and the passenger. So
Mm.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susan. And I agree. I don't know how these things work, but I do know how much they work for me often too, where somehow whatever it is that's most charged or most up for me in that moment, and then someone speaks about it or it shows up. And, I just feel like this is another way that we can be close with the ones that we've lost. Thank you for bringing that in. Nina and then Carol.
For me, it speaks to the loss of the safe ability to surrender control.
Yes.
So have someone to feel secure when someone else is driving, and when that's lost, what happens to that ability to see, to give over that sense of control.
Yes, beautifully said. And how out of control we often feel, after someone we love is gone. We didn't have the control to save them, to keep them alive. I think that so much of that is part of grief itself, and this poem speaks to it beautifully, just like you said. We'll have Karen, Teresa, then Philippa, Victoria, and then I'll offer some ideas for writing. Carol.
Uh, the whole poem spoke to me, and also people saying about synchronicity spoke to me, because my husband passed and I don't drive myself because of eyesight and other medical issues. And he would always be concerned if I were out walking or if I were out on my bike, and just driving with him, the last lines about putting my life in your hands just really, really spoke to me. And I was just telling a Lyft driver the other day, because now if I'm not with family or friends, I pay a lot of Lyft drivers to get me where I need to go. And I was just telling someone about how after he passed, his 1998 Toyota 4Runner, which he loved and took such good care of, I sold it to CarMax and got decent money for it for such an age. And it meant a lot to me that have people say, oh, what a beautiful car, I can't believe how old it is, he really took good care of it, and we'll make sure that it goes to a good owner, almost as if you're handing over a pet to be adopted. So this spoke to me in a lot of ways, and the synchronicity of speaking about driving with someone about him just a couple days ago really struck me as well. And it's coming up on 6 years. So the last thing I want to say is, I think we all know grief has no timeline.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you for sharing the story. And also, yes, that intimacy, and how beautiful that you have this knowledge that he took such good care of it, and someone else will take care of that car now. Teresa, then Philippa, then Victoria.
Thank you, Rosemary. I too am grieving my husband. And in addition to the intimacy, I also think that driving in the car was such an ordinary, everyday moment. And I find now that those are the moments that I miss and treasure the most, is just those very simple moments of being together, whether it was in the car or sitting on the couch or, not even speaking, just being in each other's presence.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm so glad you brought this up because this really is, I mean, I think that sometimes when we're writing about grief, we think, oh, I have to write about how big it is, right? And in this poem, I think we get to see how we can take the smallest, most ordinary moment and find, the connection to our beloved or the one that we're grieving in that moment. Thank you for bringing in that just very ordinary daily quality to this poem. Philippa, and if I'm saying your name wrong, please correct me.
No, that's perfect. And I was actually going to say almost exactly the same thing that Teresa said, just to notice it's such a simple, common image, and yet it profoundly shows us the depth of trust it takes when we weigh in with another and choose to live with them and be with them. And I found that really encouraging as a writer, that I can just take something so simple and it can say everything.
Thank you. Something so simple can say everything. If we can go into that kind of a moment, that's the most simple moment where we miss them, how it touches the thread of the whole relationship, or you pull the thread and it touches the whole cloth. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Victoria.
Thank you. Definitely in concurrence. Looking at that, I realized just how fortunate I am to have, and how I've taken for granted sort of the everyday miracles and what would otherwise be mundane. It's just a reminder that I would kill again for that moment.
How precious they become. Thank you. Thanks, Victoria. So precious, these moments. I appreciate every single person who spoke and shared what you saw in the poem, what it brought up for you. And now we're going to go ahead and move into doing some writing about it. And if you would, please go ahead and put those prompts up into the on the screen. And I see that they're also right now in the chat bar. Thank you so much for that, Eileen. So here are some ideas for what we might do. First of all, I just want to say again, if you sit here and you don't write a single word, this is okay. You don't have to do a thing. But here are a couple of ideas for some writing that you might do. One is just to think of what kind of a moment do you miss being able to have with the one who's gone. It may be the kind of moment you actually had driving in the car, or maybe it's a moment you wish you had and now you never will. And maybe describe this moment in detail. Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you with? And maybe just begin with this very simple line, I want to be with you in the garden. I want to be with you in the car. I want to be driving with you to the grocery store. I want to be sitting on the couch. Another idea is notice that this poem was written in the second person. It was talking to a you. This is part of how it remained ungendered, by the way. And it part of the intimacy comes because they're writing directly to the person who's gone. So in this case, the invitation, I think, is to write a letter. Just write a letter to the one who's gone and maybe begin what I miss most, or what I miss tonight, what I miss right now. And write a letter to them about how you spend your time now that they're gone and what is missing because they are not here. I notice in the chat bar, I have a hard time because I miscarried, not a lot of memories besides being pregnant. And in this case, you can write about this is what will not happen. This is the memory that I wish we had. Or you could write about the memory of being pregnant and all the dreams that you had when you were pregnant, and how go back to that moment when everything seemed possible and how you missed that moment of possibility. So we're going to take 15 minutes. Friends, we'll come back together. That means at 50 after the hour. And I just want to promise you that whatever you do, you can only do it right. I'm going to remind you that you will not need to share it, that this is for you. This is really just for you. We'll see you back at 50 minutes after the hour. Friends, I forgot to say that if these writing invitations aren't working for you, please do whatever feels right. Please don't feel like you have to do them. There's no directions. This is really just for you. About one more minute. Welcome back, friends. Oh. So we have a few moments to share not what you wrote, although there will be time for that later if you wish, but to share about your process. What did you notice? To me, this is more important than the poem itself. The poem itself is not that it's not important, but it's the byproduct of the real process, which is the showing up, which is the wondering what's here. And I'd love to hear from some of you. If you got stuck, I would love to talk about stuck, one of my favorite subjects. If you were surprised by what happened, if you felt it in your body somehow, if Victoria says there were surprising metaphors, gosh, can't they open up so astonishingly for us, like some of those metaphors that we saw in that opening poem that we did together. I'm going to need you to use the reactions bar at the bottom so that I can see when you raise your hand. I won't see you if you're just waving it around. So please do use the reactions bar and share something about what you noticed about yourself or about your process as you were writing. It's difficult, but it's surprising. And Caroline.
Hi, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I'm very, very, very grateful. Your poems have helped me a lot. I can't tell how much. So what I noticed today is while writing was that my eyes hurt. And I feel blind. And, I've cried a lot. I'm sure all of you have. But the eyes hurt a lot. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. Yes, it hurts, right? Oh my goodness, and that we cry. And then and you're not alone, right? I cried in the chat bar. I see Karen says I needed to cry and do nothing else. Yes, I mean, of course we cry. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Juliana, how about you?
Thank you. I was crying too all the time, but it was mixed with laughs too, because I was remembering my mother, and she enjoyed life at any little excuse. So I was crying, but I was also laughing, and it it felt as she was with me right now. So thank you very much.
Oh, friend, I love that you bring this up for a couple of reasons. One is I love that you bring up how poetry allows us, the sitting down and writing, just invite this invitation can bring in such divergent feelings, right? Like I mentioned at the very beginning, and that we can be laughing and we can be crying and we can feel all of this all at once. And that the poem itself is such a generous receiver of all of it, right? Of all of it, all of these feelings. Thank you so much. And the other thing that you said, oh shoot, what was it? Oh, rats. Oh, there was something else you said, and now I forget, sweetheart, but thank you so much for sharing that. Caressa and then Teresa.
Um, in writing, I wrote a letter, and it made me feel like a child again.
Yes.
You know, I wrote a letter to my mom, and I felt like I was a child when I was writing the letter, but the letter was about me being an adult. But I felt so childlike. So
Thank you. Thank you, Clarissa. Right. So there's the paradox, right? That it was about being adult and yet you felt like a child. And that it sounds like I can just hear in your voice too that there's this vulnerability that was possible in showing up. Thank you so much for sharing that. Teresa and then Louisa.
I lost you there for a second. I followed the prompt on I want to be. And I think inspired by the poem that we first read, I started just writing about so many ordinary moments, like, being on the couch watching a movie or, being in the car, running errands, sitting on the, out back or whatever. And what I found is that I had a shift in my focus. I think that throughout my grieving, my husband died suddenly and unexpectedly. And so much of my emphasis in my grieving has been on all the things that I wish I had said or I wish I had done or things that I didn't do and all of that. And what was nice about this particular prompt is that I could focus on the things that I did do and that were actually really wonderful and they were actually very, very ordinary moments as I said, prompted by the poem we first started. And so it helped me to just kind of focus a bit on what really was wonderful and that I felt like I did right and not did wrong.
I love a couple of things you've shared. One is that it was a list, right? You were just writing this list, but also I love that you had this awareness that there was a change, that there was a turning, that this was a new way to meet grief. Thank you so much for sharing that, Teresa. Louisa, then Erin, then Kitty. I think that's probably all I'll have time for. Louisa.
Yes. Like the others, I had to run and get a bunch of Kleenex because it really kind of dug fairly deep. I ended up writing a letter like Carissa, one to my husband and one to my son. And I tried to focus on one thing about my husband, and that was good because I was able to bring out an example. My husband was a fairly humorous guy, and we had a lot of private jokes between us and that. And so I was able to list those things in a letter, and they just kept coming and coming as the tears came. With my son, then I wanted to switch, kind of give equal time. And that relationship was very difficult. And so I switched it to the way that I wanted it to be and lamented that it wasn't, but I wish it could have been this. And if they were both here physically, how myself and my remaining son, what would we be doing?
Yeah. Beautiful. Louisa, I love that you point out that just how griefs can be so different, right? And how the letter itself can be such a powerful way to show up and meet them in whatever way they were, right? And however they were or however we wished they were. And I'm just going to say that again and again and again, that this is something that's, if we wrote our beloveds or the people who were grieving a letter every day, it'd be different every day, right? It could be different. Or maybe we write the same thing over and over and over and over. Believe me, we won't do that forever because we'll get bored. But sometimes we do write them again and again and again, the same things again and again. And each time we do that and each time we meet it, a chance for it to go deeper and to meet it in a new way. So I love that you bring this up. Erin, then Kitty, and then we'll read another poem.
I just wanted to share that I was really surprised and I loved being surprised. Often surprised when I write. And I wrote about just a regular old moment in the day with my son, and we had a whole new conversation that yeah, it was just lovely and surprising and beautiful. And so thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Erin. I think that surprise is part of what I love the most about writing poems every day. In fact, one of the things I didn't talk about this earlier, but I often like to say that one of the promises that I make to myself is that I won't know the end when I start. And it's because of that, right? If I allow myself to not know where this is going, then I can have that surprise, like, oh, this is what's coming up. Um, which is part of the pleasure. And I think it seems so strange sometimes to say that there's pleasure in writing about grief. And yet there can be this pleasure of, oh, this is what's here. I'm so glad you spoke to that. Thank you, Erin. Kitty, this will be our last comment before we read another poem together.
Sure, speaking of surprises, I wasn't sure where I was going to go with mine writing. And I lost one of my sisters. She died of cancer. And my oldest sister has Alzheimer's. And I've become so painfully aware that I am the keeper of the memories, that all the things that the three of us girls were raised to do, and we were raised to have high tea. Our mother always had high tea parties. And that's what I wrote about, is just the beauty of having, the silver and the china and that. And it's also so painful because there's no one else around that has that.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Kitty. Thanks for speaking to exactly that, how there's that beauty and that pain and the presence of them and the loneliness without them and how that all becomes a part of it. And you are in such good company here, right? That we we understand. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to also thank the people who wrote things in the chat bar. Philippa, I see that you were trying to raise your hand, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again soon. So we're going to read another poem now, and I'm going to once again invite two people to read out loud. This poem by James Cruz, beloved friend of mine, and I'll mention even maybe right now that James and I are going to be doing a Mother's Day program for Evermore and Reimagine. It's going to be a pre-Mother's Day program, and I'm sure that Jenna will be putting the information about that into the email that she sends out. So thank you so much, Colleen and Lori. I see there are other people who raised their hands too. Thank you for everybody jumping in. Colleen, if you would please read it first. Lori, if you would read it second. And once again, the invitation that I want to offer everyone is that the first time you listen, you reach toward the poem, wonder about any word, phrase, or image that stands out for you, and that's where we'll begin our conversation. But the second time you listen to the poem, just lean back, let the poem do all the work. Notice perhaps if you feel it somewhere in your body. And we could share that too. Where do you notice what kind of work this poem is doing on you? First, Colleen, then Lori. Thank you so much, friends.
Follow your grief, James Cruz. Everyone says to follow your bliss, but what if, some days, you need to pull the shades, draw the covers over your head, and turn toward grief instead? What if sadness calls like the one candle left burning in a room, with its blackened wick, its scent of struck matches, and flicker of long gone breath? Joy is the fire we're taught never to deny, but why not see sorrow as elemental too? Plunging both hands deep into that rich, black soil in which anything might grow.
Follow your grief, James Cruz. Everyone says to follow your bliss, but what if some days you need to pull the shades, draw the covers over your head and turn toward grief instead? What if sadness calls like the one candle left burning in a room with its blackened wick, its scent of struck matches and flicker of long gone breath. Joy is the fire we're taught never to deny, but why not see sorrow as elemental too? Plunging both hands deep into that rich black soil in which anything might grow.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lori. Thanks, Colleen. Boy, that sounds like the Gregory Orr poem we began with too, right? Growing through grieving. Anything might grow. So I'm going to invite you again to notice what stands out about this poem for you. What does it bring up in you? I'm going to invite you to use the reactions to raise your hand. And Joanne, hi friend, welcome. Well, you're on mute though. You're still on mute, sweetheart.
Yeah. I just love James Crews poems because he has such cool twists in them. But I love when he said, now where did it go? Oh, it's in the other, it's in the other one. Um, Joy is the fire we're taught never to deny, but why not see sorrow as elemental too, plunging both hands deep into that rich black soil in which anything might grow. I just love that because, joy is often a little more popular, I suppose you could say, than grief, but growth comes from both. Maybe different growth, but it comes from both. And he captured that so beautifully, I think.
Thank you. Thanks for saying exactly that. Yes, what if we did that? It may not be popular, but look, that's what we're doing here together. Friends, that's what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to see what is here, what's here in this deepening that we would never, ever have chosen. But how does it grow us? Thank you, Joanne. Beth, and then Carol.
Thanks. Am I?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, that was just a beautiful poem. And it went right back to what I had written in the first one in our writing exercise, which was um, I wrote about my mother, who I lost when I was 27, and I can't tell you how many poems I've written about my mother and her loss or my relationship to her, whatever, many things. And I turned to that poem again, to that poem of my mother again, and found nothing or didn't feel the grief. And I was feeling like I miss the grief because I miss it. It was my connection to her and and such rich black soil for exploring who she was and who I am because of her and in our relationship. And so it was the serendipity of being, yes, that's why I keep turning to her again and again and again. And it's different. It was a surprise this time where that rich black soil is for something else now, maybe. I don't know.
Beth, I love that. I love that you point to just how much it changes, right? Which is part for me has continued to be so helpful, right? Because it was rich black soil, and now it's something else that is maybe sterile sometimes, or maybe there's an ecstasy in it sometimes, or it can turn out so many different ways, um and isn't it strange to miss grief? Who of us could ever have believed that that was possible? And yet I know exactly what you mean, and I know that you and I are not alone. Thank you so much for sharing that. Carol.
Hi, thank you for this. The phrase that cut me was long gone breath.
Yes.
And I don't think I can say anything else.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that in, the long gone breath. even just a little bit of music of that, the long gone breath. And Deborah Hoover wrote, thinking of the breath of life as related to the candle flicker of long gone breath, this image so beautiful, the repetition of anything, anything, and how that repeating gives it depth and the real possibility of what might grow. So just building on what you had said too. Oh, Karen's bringing in that the blackened wick and the black soil. Thank you for that, Karen. Nina, then Jean, then Cherie, and that will probably be it.
Well, I wanted to answer the question, why not see sorrow as elemental too, with because there's a fear that delving into that rich black soil, that by doing that, it'll bury us too. That we stay with the joy or anything but the grief because of our fear that we won't be able to extract ourselves from it.
Oh, Nina.
Rather than understanding, and for me, I only understood in retrospect about the growth, but in the beginning, it seemed exactly the opposite.
Sweet friend, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing that in. And I think that what a gorgeous way to respond to this poem. You know, it's not one of the writing invitations that I'm going to offer, but what a great one to answer that question and say, yeah, I'll tell you why not, because I'm afraid. And to write about that fear and to just to meet exactly what's here, right? I think that that's the beauty of writing a poem. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to turn out nice. It doesn't have to have a promise at the end. It doesn't have to have anything light. It doesn't have to feel like things are going to grow. Like truly, Colleen said, I wrote that line down to use as a prompt, right? Because how beautiful to just honor, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. That's why not, because I'm afraid. And just let that be exactly what we explore is how I'm afraid. So beautiful. Thank you for bringing that in. I know you are not alone with that. And Jean, then Cherie, and then we'll do some writing.
I was also drawn to the phrase flicker of long gone breath and something about the flicker. My sister died over 50 years ago, and it was a sudden violent death, and the flicker, the little flickers of um, who she was, and grateful I still have enough memory to, so it's just kind of like the flicker of a flame and the breath. So I love that phrase.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for bringing that in. Just the power of one word, right?
Yeah.
To take us into a full body experience of what it is to meet the absence of someone even 50 years later. Beautiful. Thank you. Cherie, this will be our last comment before we do some writing.
Thank you. Wow, this was quite a journey. From kind of the burying of the self or the hiding under the covers and just going into this darkness, and then again, the darkness on the wick. But I loved the sadness calling from another room. It's like it's distant, but you cannot ignore it. It's still there. It's living nearby. And just very visceral, the scent, the flicker, the breath, because breathing is so hard sometimes. But I loved the plunging of the hands in probably more than anything, because it seemed more frantic than your teaspoon digging the soil, just almost like reaching in to unbury the self you just buried into the covers, trying to find that something somewhere in the soil. So,
Right. Not exactly the teaspoon approach. Yeah. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you for that. And I think what I noticed in part too, as you were speaking, is that the entire poem is questions. It's three questions. The whole poem is three questions. So interesting then to let ourselves not know. And I just want to encourage you all, by the way, as you're writing, to know there's sometimes people think, oh, it's a poem, it's supposed to be wise. Oh my goodness. If you had to be wise to write a poem, friends, I would have not, I would have been done writing I would have never even started writing poems. Notice that sometimes the wisest things we can say, the truest things we can say are questions. Just to ask a question, or in this case, to ask three questions. What if? What if? Why not try it this way? I'm going to point out also that it's just so astonishing when we allow ourselves to turn toward grief with whatever is true, with whatever's most true for you right now, knowing it could change in 5 minutes, tomorrow, in a year. I'm going to go ahead and put now in the chat bar, and also it's going to come up on the screen, some ideas for writing. I have 3 ideas this time, but once again, it doesn't matter at all. You get no special bonus points if you use the prompts. They're really only here for you if you need a starting place. But if something else has a lot of juice or life in it for you, for heaven's sakes, do that. Or, as I've said earlier, you do not need to write a single word, just meet it. Here are some ideas for writing out of this poem. What does it look like when you turn toward grief? What does that feel like inside you? What do you think it might look like from the outside? And just begin a poem with, when I turn toward grief, and see what comes after that. Another idea, what keeps you from turning toward grief? That's kind of the idea of, well, I'll tell you why not, because I'm afraid I'm going to get buried in that soil. What keeps you from turning toward grief? Write a letter to whatever it is that keeps you from turning toward grief. So maybe you're writing a letter to fear or to your work or to exhaustion, and ask that thing questions, or maybe write a letter to yourself. The last idea. Sometimes, friends, I imagine, and this is one thing that I do love about poetry, is it allows me to go out of the self, just this one, unidirectional perspective, the perspective of the I, and to watch myself as if I'm watching a movie, the movie of me. Imagine you're watching the movie of you as you meet grief, and write in the third person about what a viewer might see if they were to watch you meet grief. Today she is, oh look, today she can't get out of bed. Oh, look, today she managed to get to the store. Oh, look, today she's laughing with her friends. Allow the poem to present the facts of whatever grief looks like with no judgment, with great compassion for whatever the scene contains. All right, there are 3 ideas, but as I told you, it doesn't matter if you use them. If they're not working for you, do whatever does work for you. You could always go back to Today Grief Is. Once again, we're going to have 15 minutes, so we'll be back here together at 32 minutes after the hour. Whatever you do, friends, you can only do it right. And once again, I'm going to give you a 1-minute warning before we come back. A little less than a minute. Welcome back, friends. So here's what's going to happen now. You're going to have a choice to make. You can either stay in the big group and we're going to continue to talk about process, or if you would like to share what you wrote, I'm going to invite you to go into a small group, and the groups will have 3 people, maybe 2. And here's what will happen. If you choose to go into a small group, there will be a chance for you to share. Each person is going to have approximately 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, you could share something that you wrote tonight. You could share just a part of what you wrote tonight, the part that feels safe. Or you could not share what you wrote, but you could talk about your process. Or you could say, you know what, I am really just here to listen. All of these are really appropriate things for you to do if you are the speaker. If you are the listener, then that is what you are here to do, is to be a listener, not to offer critique. There will be absolutely no critique. Honestly, I say you should break every single rule that I give you, but not this one. This is the one you can't break. So we are only listening to each other. We are here to witness each other and support each other. So after a person reads, they may use their whole 5 minutes and just talk that whole time. That would be great. But if there's time, you can ask them a question about their process. Notice, you're not going to talk about yourself. You're not going to talk about your own experience. You're not going to talk about their poem. And I think it'd be better if you, nope. There are really only a few things that you're going to say to that person. Number one, you're going to say thank you. And number two, and I'm going to put a few ideas in the chat bar right now. Here are a few ideas for the kinds of open, honest questions that you can ask them about their process so that they get to think, they get to be at the center of attention this whole time, right? And you can ask them, what surprised you about your writing, or what surprised you about your process? What part of it feels most true to you? Where's the juice? What part was most difficult to write? What did you notice about your own writing as you read it out loud? Or maybe you take a line from something they said, just like you were underlining it in the poems we were talking about earlier, and you say, tell me about that. Those are all really great ways to respond to somebody. Please, please, as a listener, know that your job is not to help them in any way except to reflect back to them some kind of a question that can help them to think about themselves. That's your job as a listener. Before we go into the small groups, if you do, and even if you choose to stay in the big group, I'm going to invite you to repeat these words after me. I have adapted them from Bill Plotkin of the Animas Institute. Nobody can hear you because you're on mute, but there in your room by yourself, I'm going to invite you to say these words out loud. Are you willing to listen? To the ears of your heart. I said it wrong. Are you willing to listen? With the ears of your heart. To the other voices of yourself speaking. Thank you for that beautiful promise to yourself and to each other. And with that, there's going to be an invitation for you to go into a small group. You're going to need to actually accept that invitation. It's going to come to you at any moment. you might be in a group where you find yourself in a room all by yourself for a moment because the other people didn't choose to go into a small group. That's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to be working, and so is Eileen, to make sure that everybody finds a partner. And we're going to make those groups all cohere. So don't worry if you're in a room by yourself, please be patient. It'll probably take us about 2 minutes. Then Jenna is going to come in and she'll let you know it's time to change after 5 minutes. So you don't have to be a timekeeper. Jenna will come in and tell you time to change. All right. And Eileen, if you would go ahead and send out those invitations to go into small groups, please. You'll need to click join a breakout room. And for those of you who are in the main room, it's going to take me just a few moments as I help put people into smaller groups. So please go ahead and just hang tight while I move people around for a moment. All right, and Eileen, it looks like we're close. Room 19. There's someone by them there. Okay, I believe all the rooms now have at least 2 people in them. And Eileen, if you would go ahead and check and make sure that that's true, that would be wonderful. For the people who are left here in the main room, we do now have, and Jenna, let's see, let's go ahead and say that the starting time for 5 minutes is, let's say about a minute ago, probably. So it's 7:37. So at 42, after the hour, you'll go ahead and jump in, or 43, somewhere in there. And let people know that it's time to change. For anybody who's here still in the main room, just know that Jenna's going to be jumping in. So if you're speaking and it's time for Jenna to jump in, please don't worry when I say, hey, pause just for a moment so Jenna can make her announcement. Oh, good. Look at that. I see that actually the breakout rooms now have the timer. Thanks, Eileen. You're amazing. Okay, so at this point, friends, we have a chance just to have a conversation about what you notice about writing and grief, poetry and grief. If you have questions, if you have an observation about yourself and what your process was, open to all of that. Once again, I'm going to need you to use the reactions bar to raise your hand because I won't necessarily see you if you are raising your hand, or you can always also use the chat bar to try and say, hey, don't know how to use, I don't know how to find that, but please pay attention. I'm right here. Anybody willing to share about your process, what you noticed about yourself tonight? Debbie Tripp is saying, where is the reaction bar? If you look at the bottom of your screen, I'm guessing that there's maybe a little sideways heart that says react. And if you click on that, then you'll see that there's a little line at the bottom that says raise hand. And Philippa, oh, good. You found your raise hand bar again.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
So, what surprised me about my process then was that it ended up being so simple. So, one of the things I'm grieving is a loss of a very wonderful career as a medical doctor through getting ill being a medical doctor. It happened a long time ago, and the grief is just it cycles through me. And it's come up again recently. And the fear was that I stay away from the grief was because it's bottomless, it will never end. And I did not want to do that prompt. It was like, I do not want to go here. And then I thought, I can just go here and see what's there. And I had this clear image of that fear that it was bottomless lurks behind the closet of grief. And if I just let it come out, then it could turn into a cello and it could turn into a beautiful bass note. And then my now self, my little piece ended with my now self can sing. And it was just such a revelation that I've pushed that huge thing away. And this little prompt helped me to transform it. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you for so much. But first of all, just for pointing out, yes, it's just darn scary, right? It is so terrifying to turn toward it. I often think that writing is one of the most courageous things we can do. It took so much courage for you to say, okay, that was no simple act, Philippa. That was you saying, okay, I'm going to do this terrifying thing. Then what a gift, and thank you for sharing it, that there was in fact this cello, that in fact there was something beautiful hiding here, that there was in fact something very simple, life affirming. I'm so grateful too that you shared that with us, and how different it is, how different it can be than our fear. Thank you for being so brave. Thank you. Elsa and then Debbie.
Hey guys.
Hi. Hello.
Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
Sorry. Hold on one moment. We're gonna have Jenna is gonna jump in and let the other folks know that it's time to shift. So we're just gonna be pause for a second.
Thank you so much.
Hi, friends. It's time to let the next person share. Thank you so much.
Great job. Thanks, Jenna. All right, Elsa, back to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate this tonight. I lost my 15-year-old son 9 months ago. He ended his life very unexpectedly, and I've wanted to write. It's been really hard, but I found just now writing about it in the third person, I was somehow through the lens of that able to show myself compassion and let go of some of the guilt, let go of some of the anger at myself, let go of some of the anger at my child, recognizing that whatever happened, that it was not within my capability or realm to understand it. It was not within his capability or realm to understand it. And that mental illness is vicious and it's invisible. And that I have to find compassion and forgiveness for us as parents and for him. And underneath that layer of anger and guilt and frustration is where I push the grief away. I have to find a way to process through it at some point because that's my defense mechanism, is to avoid it.
Oh, Elsa, thank you. It was so brave. Thank you for the writing and also for the sharing. You moved me too. Thank you. I just want to honor how beautifully you've modeled for us what it is to discover self-compassion and how writing can be such a powerful way to meet ourselves with generosity, right? And I love that you also discovered, as I have, as other people have, that the third person is often a way to do this, right? That there can be so much compassion that comes in, self-compassion that comes in when we allow for us to see from this new perspective, just a little bit out. I do this up here because for me somehow it's always like right here. This is where other perspective is. It lives somehow above my right shoulder. that allows me to see myself and the rest of the world with this, a slight distance, this little bit of remove that allows for compassion to come in, for perspective to come in, this allowing, like you said. Thank you so much, Elsa. That was really powerful. Thank you. Debbie, how about you?
So what I noticed was how hard it is to stay focused. Like I would start to write about the person that I was thinking most of at the time, and then it was like, what about so and so? And it was everything to keep me unfocused. And then I realized also, so I thought, it's this fear. What is this? And my dad was an adrenaline junkie. He loved to be angry and outraged. And I found I'm angry and I'd rather be angry because there's energy, and the grief of it is there. It feels like it flattens me and I have no energy.
Oh, wow. All right. So a few things to respond to. Thank you so much, Debbie, for bringing this in. Number one is, yeah, I think noticing then that there are different energies to anger, to grief, just noticing how how energetic they can be. And that same way that we began tonight with, today grief is, just noticing how that might come up, with the anger, with the flattening, just letting it be whatever it's going to be. It's not like we get a lot of control about that, right? But just that noticing how powerful that is. The other thing I wanted to point out was how beautifully you put, and I noticed several people nodding when you said something about, oh yeah, it's hard to stay focused sometimes. Okay, so it's hard to stay focused sometimes. That's fine. This is not a problem. Let yourself be unfocused. I just don't think that there's a problem with that. Noticing it. Oh, tonight I'm not focused. When I'm notice these things for myself, what I do myself, and I even made myself a necklace that says hello, so that I say hello to whatever it is that's happening. Oh, hello, unfocusedness. Oh, hello, part that feels angry. Oh, hello, part who's flat. And I just say hello to all of it. And somehow that hello neutralizes it, equalizes it, makes it so that it's okay. It's okay. It's okay that these things are happening. Of course they're happening. And instead of pushing them away, pretending they're not happening, that takes an awful lot of energy. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Thank you so much. And we're going to have Louisa and Heidi too, I think, but we're going to have Jenna jump in and help people change.
Thank you. Hi, friends. I wanted to let you know it's time to change speakers. Thank you so much.
All right, and Louisa.
Well, I think you touched on quite a bit of what I was going to say, just a couple of points. I found this difficult to do. I used the prompt when I turn toward grief because I guess one thing, it's so big. Because just like you said, one day it looks like this, another day it looks like that. Elsa, I just wanted to mention my son too died by suicide, and that guilt takes a lot of work. That's when I look at grief, I keep that consciously at bay many times because then I don't think I can go on if I delve into that. I feel that I'll deal with that over time, long period of time. But I guess, Rachel, just grief looks so different from moment to moment. And sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, am I really grieving? So I got kind of stuck.
Hello, stuck. Hello, stuck.
Yes.
I just want to say, Louisa, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure you were not alone. Stuck to me. I have a lot of writing students, and sometimes they'll say to me something about being stuck, and I'll say, I don't think stuck is a problem. And they'll say to me, "Are you sure? Because it feels like a problem." And I say, "Yes, actually, I am sure that stuck is part of it. That stuck is part of it. That is not a problem. That sometimes writing is about being stuck." I'm going to do right now an imitation of me writing. This is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer sitting down to write. It doesn't look like writing, does it? But it might also be me dusting the piano, me eating potato chips. It could be all kinds of other things that look nothing like writing. Stuck is just part of it. And then when we continue to sit with it and stay with it, be curious about it. Oh, hello, stuck. We don't stay stuck forever, friends. Thank you so much for sharing that. Heidi, how about you? Oh, you're on mute still, friend.
Thank you, Rosemary, and everyone. It's interesting that you said the hello because when I started, I decided to talk to grief if I face it, and I said, "Hello, grief, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again." That was the line that came to my mind. And actually, my first thought was about grief being generative, partly because the ways that when I see the reflections of it in others and it reflects mine, that even what we've been experiencing just now, right? Like that generation of connection and like that deep meaning. But I got stuck and I switched to the looking at myself from the outside. And what I wanted to share about that was I noticed that what I was writing about was that when in the third person when I could turn towards grief, that it was honest and real. And I started to think of the word pretense or pretend. And I never this is what poetry does, right? Sometimes just that word, I thought pretend, that I'm tending for looking out for, anticipating other people's needs sometimes as part of my pretending I'm okay or not looking at something. And so I just wanted to share that it's like that self-compassion or getting over the fear of facing the pain at times, but something about that third person made me realize that what's freeing about being real and how sometimes I'm pretending because I'm worried about protecting others from my grief because they're afraid or they're scared for me. Not just I'm scared that I won't dig myself out, but they're afraid that I won't dig myself out. So I just wanted to share that. And that was just thinking of those words. Like, what does it mean to pretend?
This is absolutely gorgeous. And I love, Heidi, what you're modeling for us is the way that writing can bring curiosity to it, right? Like, oh, look at that. Look what's in that word. And how
That
just
yeah, it never occurred
hard,
to me.
right? And open things up. I also want to say, and I often, I said it at the beginning that, when we're writing, I always offer to myself, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be true. Sometimes very hard to know it's true because we're
Mm,
pretending, because pretending can be safer,
right,
right?
right.
So that's sometimes when I notice I'm doing that with that pretending, I'm like, oh, look at that. Look how I want that to be true. And then I'll just invite myself to write that. What I wish were true is this, right? What I'm pretending is true is this. That allows again for that lens to come in and see what's real, what's most authentic. Thank you, Heidi. Thanks to everyone else who shared, and welcome back to everyone else who was in a small group. If you notice that you're not muted, will you please go ahead and mute yourself now? I see a handful of people who came back and were unmuted, so I appreciate you doing that. Sweet friends, we have about 5 minutes left, and in this time, there are two things that I want to do. Well, three. Number one, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for showing up for yourself and each other. And I want to thank Evermore for creating this and making it possible. I really want to thank Eileen and Jenna who have helped to support us technologically and even in, like, how did you register? Thank you so much to both of them for making this possible. I'm going to invite you right now to think about what are you taking away from our time together? Be very selfish about this. What are you taking away? It could be a feeling. It could be a line from a poem. It could be something someone said. It could be a line from your own poem. It could be an experience that you had. What are you taking away? You can write this down for yourself. Sometimes writing it down helps it stick just a little bit. I'm also going to invite a handful of people to share them. I like to call them pearls. This is what my friend Augusta calls them, pearls. What pearls are you taking away? You could share it either in the chat bar or again by using the reactions tab at the bottom and raising your hand and maybe share your pearl with everyone else, which is sometimes a way to make it so we all carry away even more blessings. Carol writes in the chat bar, a feeling of more peace. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Dina says, there is no way to do this wrong, which is to say you can only do it right, right? Any way that we do this, we can only do it right, friends. Validation of the way grief, even after many years has passed, we continue to meet it again and again and again, don't we? We are not alone, says Donna. The courage to write. Thank you, Martha. And Kitty says, being able to share my grief with others helps so much. Yes. Jean says, so many ways to be with grief. And Margot says, nothing will be fixed by the writing. And yet, how much it helps, right? It changes not the world, but it changes the way we see the world. It changes the way we meet the world. And that, friends, changes everything. Morgan says, healing in community. Isn't it true how we companion each other? The power of that. I've been thinking so much about how it is through love and companionship that we are able to meet the things that are the most difficult to meet. Thank you for showing up for each other. It was lovely to attempt to articulate the magic of turning toward grief. Thank you, Erin. And Judith says, I quite like what I wrote and I want to work on it more. Wonderful. Victoria says, my grief doesn't have to be sorrowful. My letter was a camp letter to the mother I lost tragically as a child. Beautiful. Thank you, Victoria. And Deborah says, what a refuge writing can be. Yes. Carol says, I love the phrase someone said, a closet of grief. I'll try to remember to take it out occasionally. Thank you for that. And Eric says, stay with my grief and trust. Melissa says, the pearl is staying with the process even when it is hard. Thank you. Daniela says, more questions than answers, a hunger and thirst for more. By the way, we will be doing it. Speaking of more, we'll be doing this every other month for the rest of the year. So every other month, please join us again. All of those dates are already on the Evermore website. I'm guessing that Jenna will also be sending those all out as she said when she sends out all of the recording and all of this, and she is smiling big. So I think the answer to that is yes. um, thank you. There's a handful more. Please do read them. But in this last minute, I'd like to go ahead and ask you to join me in the Kumbaya moment, friends, where I'm going to sing again the poem that I sang by Gregory Orr at the very beginning of tonight and ask you to sing along. Of course, you're on mute. No one will sing you. If you unmute, my gosh, that's a disaster on Zoom, as you might know. So go ahead. If you don't like to sing it, that's okay. You don't have to. Maybe just whisper the words. But here we go. Please repeat after me. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Growing through grieving, through a deepening we didn't choose. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've lit a candle, I'm going to invite you to blow it, not to blow it out, but to share that light with the world. Hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemerry. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful to be together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Till we meet again. Take good care.
Mhm.